Many people misunderstand how long eternity is, often associating it with the idea of infinity. However, my personal experience has shown that eternity is 15 years, 2 months, 27 days, and a few odd hours. It ended as soon as it began, with my wife Tracy tenderly locking eyes with her partner and kissing passionately. Except this time, it was the first time I'd ever had this partner, and the kiss followed my suggestion that she'd be mine forever, the night the bell rang. In other circumstances, I found a single onlooker at a restaurant 2 towns away from our residence as Tracy and her new lover exchanged admiring glances and passionately kissed. The details of how I ended up in the same restaurant as this couple don't matter. The fact that they were located an hour away from their hometown proved to be a deliberate effort to remain discreet. At first curious, my emotions quickly turned from curiosity to shock, disgust, and anger. As the scene unfolded before me, I thought about physically confronting them. However, I had always been taught to beat a woman, so I sat there in awe. As they focused only on each other, confident that no one who knew them would see them, they enjoyed a hearty meal and occasionally engaged in a game of kissing. I ate slowly, got dessert, and watched them. My emotions alternated between anger and helplessness. When they finished eating, they got up and left holding hands. I sat there in silent rage, feeling like the most ignorant idiot ever. I have been married to Tracy for over 14 years, 2 years ago, but I never doubted that it went both ways. He was never interested in another woman and never left any clues in the conversation. Waiting to grow old together, I mistakenly believed I knew him inside and out. The pounding of her keys pales in comparison to my anger at her infidelity, regardless of her gender. He turned his love away, betraying the promise he had made so many years ago. When he accepts my ring, it represents eternity. It seems timeless. Who would have thought that some eternities have an expiration date? After settling the bill, I got into the car and slowly drove home. I had a lot to think about. Tracy wasn't expecting my early return after the trip, but luckily I was able to sort out all the issues ahead of time. So I went home on Friday night instead of Saturday afternoon as originally planned. I had been away since Monday morning, and aside from missing Tracy and the kids, the lack of intimacy for more than 3 days had left me with pent-up energy that needed to be released, at least until I witnessed what happened at the restaurant. I was an hour away from our hometown, an easy drive. However, being ahead of schedule, I decided to go to dinner for a break from driving, and the rest, as they say, is history. Our kids are 12 and 10, and if Tracy wants to go out, she's fine enough to be left alone in the evenings, which I don't have a problem with. However, I wondered if they were aware of the situation because neither of them said anything else. Maybe they were just as in the dark as I was. Anyway, I knew they weren't happy with what was going on. When I got home, I did my usual self-analysis. What I didn't do, how long it took, etc. At least she didn't have to worry about her boyfriend having a bigger manhood than mine. Call me, I'm talking about myself. Humor. I walked in the door at 9, and Tracy wasn't home yet. My daughters, Lisa, 12, and Ariel, 10, greeted me happily, but I looked up without really seeing them, nervous and sure I'd be home early. The same cannot be said for Tracy. When Tracy came in 2 hours later, she must have seen my car in the garage and felt a little refreshed. I noticed a change in his demeanor, which seemed less content than in our previous meetings. He asked if I was out of the blue, worried about his first words. I playfully responded by emphasizing his greeting. Tracy remembered with a slight frown that she would have made a nice dinner if she had known I would be home early. He revealed that he had ordered pizza for the kids, and that he and Kate had gone downtown for wine and sandwiches. Tracy, avoiding eye contact, asked if I remembered Kate from my office and if she had mentioned her before. Despite his dishonesty, I confirmed. Tracy then sarcastically mentioned Kate as a busty blonde, remembering the trail of admirers she had left behind. I don't think Tracy has the ability to walk into a room and rally a football team. This is not just about its effect on married women. Kate, I thought to myself, attracted a goddess with her magnificent breasts. He was about 26 years old and started working at the insurance company where Tracy worked last year. The two became fast friends, and apparently at age 39, Tracy can still turn more than a few heads. She was also blonde, with a nice figure and curves in all the right places. He was 10 pounds heavier than when we first met him, But he was still a great pack, and at least until recently, he was my pack. Despite the worried expression on her face, Tracy worked calmly. As for me, I couldn't walk, so I told him I was tired and went to bed. He gave me a quick peck on the lips as I passed him up the stairs. Maybe I was wrong, but I was almost sure I could taste the games of love on her lips. I went to bed but didn't sleep. The kids fell asleep in front of me, and after a few minutes I heard a quiet conversation and realized Tracy was on the phone with Kate. It was a short conversation, and a few minutes later I heard Tracy take a shower in the master bathroom. Either I scared him so much that he went off the game and wasn't as careful as before, or he thought I was dreaming and didn't know about it. My heart sank even lower. Between baby stuff and housework, Tracy didn't get to spend much time with her over the weekend. He wanted to have a family party on Saturday night, but I said I wasn't in the mood and left the room, effectively ending the conversation. He must have known something was up because I'm rarely rude to him. Monday morning at work, I asked my boss to take time off due to personal issues. After going through a divorce about 10 years ago and remarrying 5 years ago, my boss realized something was wrong with the John Mason family. Given the success of my sales trip last week, he didn't hesitate when I asked for a break. As I prepared to leave his office, he handed me his business card, indicating that he was a divorce attorney. He expressed his sorrow and regret for the unexpected turn in my relationship with Tracy. I recognized his feelings, and I envisioned a long-term relationship with Tracy. Acting on my boss's suggestion, I sought legal advice 2 days later. Despite my attorney's potential for professional judgment, he genuinely cared about my feelings and offered gentle guidance. She was surprised when I decided to hire a private investigator to gather concrete evidence of Tracy's infidelity. I understood from his attitude that, as he indicated, in a state of innocence, such evidence might not carry much weight. He said the main concern could be potential issues with visitation rights, but he believes it won't be a significant issue. No matter how hard I tried, dealing with Tracy and the girls at home was something I couldn't do. Tracy probably noticed this, given the minimal communication. I think the girls thought something was wrong with our unusual silence. I gave Tracy many opportunities to talk, but she never took the opportunity. The following week, the situation escalates when Tracy is given a job. Call it petty if you want, but I wanted Tracy to go through even a fraction of what she was going through. It was serviced at 11:03 a.m. because my phone started ringing continuously at 11:05 a.m. I ignored 15 calls from him and several unknown numbers, suspecting that he may have used his friends' phones to contact me. Surprisingly, I felt an increase in energy for the first time since opening it with Kate, and I had an amazing day. Tracy's car was in the garage when I arrived at 5:30. He wasted no time in admitting his existence and expressing his anger at his service to his friends and colleagues. I didn't leave until I got home and put my things away. The girls were in the living room, and it felt like a movie on the big screen. I quietly said that I want her to serve her master for her master. Tracy's anger disappeared, replaced by tears. I went back and questioned his knowledge of Kate and told him that there was no caution in what they were doing. I asked him 2 things: how much and when he planned to tell me. He replied, admitted that it had been about 6 months and said they were going to let me know soon. In less than 30 seconds, Tracy's demeanor went from angry to defeated. He stumbled over to the kitchen table and sat down. I went into the liquor cabinet, grabbed a bottle of Buffalo Trace bourbon, poured myself a double, and sat across from him. Apparently, if assassination was possible, it would be gone in the first 2 seconds. I watched him and he couldn't take his eyes off the table. Quietly, I asked how I couldn't have known about him hitting the switch after all this time. He replied that he had recently revealed about himself. He said it wasn't planned, it just happened. Finally, he looked at me and told me not to change anything between us. Tracy expressed her continued love for me and her need to explore this new side of herself. He asked for my help and more time to investigate, saying it was his turn. I was shocked and asked if 6 months was not enough time for his research. I said that if he really loved me, he would remember our vows and not entertain the idea of checking at all. I thought loyalty was more important than sex, and he shouldn't have considered such actions. He responded by saying that true love can forgive a mistake, which I once argued could be a mistake, but 6 months into making a conscious decision. I expressed my disappointment, stressing that love should not give him license to break my heart and endanger our family. I confirmed that his actions had nothing to do with gender. He came back and accused me of being a complainer, saying that he had a lot to do with girls. I confronted him, accused him of turning me into a piece of trash in my eyes, and objected to his love for me, now that he loves me like an animal and not a man. I accused him of being in love with another woman and pointed out that I had fallen into second place. When he denied it, I yelled at him to stop, saying that I knew what I saw and that I knew him better than anyone else. He looked guilty, and I had seen them together. Although he tried to fix the situation quickly, I argued that he didn't change his love for someone else instead. I expressed the opinion that if it were someone else, things could be different. At least I could resist it. He asked if we could be civil, to which I replied in no uncertain terms that he was in love with the woman he owned and eventually stole my wife. A few months later, I learned that the children knew nothing about Tracy's work. They thought Aunt Kate was my mother's best friend. They were both seen sharing quick kisses and gentle touches from time to time. But since Aunt Kate wasn't human, they didn't think anything was out of place. I found out about this one night when the kids and I were out to dinner, and the kids mentioned that Kate had been spending more time at home since she moved. They seemed to understand that it is Kate's sister. Tracy and I broke up for reasons. As we live in a no-fault divorce, our finances are pretty much split down the middle. I had to pay her child support. He took the children before they were in college. Of course I had to pay child support. I moved into an apartment about 15 minutes from my old house. I was completely overwhelmed. Tracy and I kept in touch through the girls. They participated in various activities both at school and outside, and Tracy and I did our best to show them that we would support them as much as possible. I don't know why, but Tracy fought hard with the divorce, and it took a year before we got through it. I was polite and nothing else when I ran into Tracy and Kate at my daughter's parties. When it came to family events, I was always invited. But knowing that Tracy would be there, I apologized and ran away. I know I missed out on wonderful family memories, but when he and Kate were around, I needed to keep my cool. I worked a single day to give the kids birthday and Christmas presents. As you might expect, we each kept our friends before we got married. Almost all of our friends stayed in Tracy after we got married. As one of the men explained to me, many of them felt uncomfortable considering that I had lost my wife to a woman. The consensus seemed to me to be somehow deserved, and several of our married female friends said almost exactly the same thing. I let them go without a fight because, as the old saying goes, you know your true friends are in bad shape. By my own choice, I didn't get to know much about the next few years. My heart certainly wasn't ready for it, and I didn't need much communication. After being alone for a year, I went to a local animal shelter and adopted a German Shepherd, probably about 3 years old. I actually went into the shelter and asked them to show me the 3 tallest dogs. The one I chose had been there since he was a strong puppy, but after several rejections, he turned into a quiet, reclusive animal with the saddest pair I've ever seen in a pet. I felt like we were soulmates because we were both rejected. The dog's name is Bob, not some cute pet name or something called a cute Disney character, Bob. Bob caught me, I caught Bob. The first thing he did when I brought him into my apartment was climb onto the couch next to me and curl up next to me. He was good with the girls when I was with them on weekends, but I think Bob liked it best when we were guys. He loved to walk with me, and we could talk about any topic. Granted, Bob was mostly silent during these conversations, but I could tell by his face and ears that he was paying attention to everything he was saying. A few years later, my oldest daughter, Lisa, met and married a guy from Boston in college. As I was doing very well in my engineering career, I could give him the wedding of his dreams. I couldn't be prouder of him. But after the service, I reprimanded her for breaking one of my lines. I got it right during the rehearsal, but my voice cracked under the pressure of the real situation. When I came to my senses, I answered Tracy's question about who he was going to marry, and it was me instead, her mother and me. Sitting in the front row next to Tracy, she leaned towards me and quietly told me she was disgusted, and I knew it. Kate, who was sitting next to Tracy, leaned forward and looked boldly at me. I forgot to tell him wisely, checking to see if the pastor had noticed our exchange. Weddings always bring back memories for me, and at first I looked back fondly on my wedding day. This memory lasted about 30 seconds when I pictured Tracy and Kate together at a restaurant when I found out about them. When I woke up from my reverie, Tracy just looked at me sadly. She blushed and quickly turned away. I guess I wasn't the only one walking down memory lane. Although I didn't try to look, I could see that Tracy and Kate were enjoying themselves with Lisa and her new husband, Jerry, and others. It was then that I noticed I was one of the only people over 50 in the room. Feeling sorry for myself, I walked into the open bar and ordered a shot of 18-year-old Irish whiskey. Taking the glass, I sat down at the table and quietly patted myself on the back for hosting such a great event. 3 years later, I was going to play the father of the bride again, the youngest, Ariel, whose mayor asked him to walk her down the aisle. This time, I decided not to go alone and finally made a big effort to meet people. 3 weeks later, after returning home from a 3-day trip out of state, I stopped at a small restaurant about an hour from my apartment. Although I usually avoid bars like this due to my dislike of country western music, they were promoting pork BBQ, so I had to stop. The food was great, and when the DJ started playing music at 8 p.m., I looked around to see if there was anyone worth talking to. At that moment, a 30-year-old black woman with an angelic face walked through the door. She was very attractive, and I wondered why an unmarried young black woman was in a bar at this time. On the other hand, there I was, a lonely old white guy. I knew she was too young for me, but damn. I asked the bartender to put all the drinks on my table. He said he paid for his drink and gestured in my direction. He walked over to my table to thank me, and I invited him to sit down. To my surprise, she sat next to me and introduced herself as Jade. During a fun evening, he invited me to his place and caught me off guard. We made our way to the door without hesitation, and a man in a cowboy hat approached Jade and gave her a light kiss on the cheek. I stopped abruptly and Jade introduced me as her husband, Fred. He asked if he could join in and watch, and Fred smiled and said they were engaged. I expressed my discomfort that there was something wrong with the situation and the disorder. I raised my hands, signaled to stop, and was alone in my car. I turned to my church to find friendship. Carrie, a 50-year-old divorcee with long dark hair, 34B breasts, long legs, and a big smile, and I had a good life. After a few dates, we returned to the apartment and became intimate. However, during the meeting, she started mentioning her ex-husband Jim's name. The situation escalates as she screams during the next climax. I immediately stopped, explaining that it wasn't Jim. In response, she expressed her true anger and asked why I had stopped. Quietly, I drove her home, and needless to say, there was no fifth day. For my next dating activity, I invited a colleague out for dinner and dancing. Allison Webb, a 42-year-old divorcee who separated from her husband 5 years ago, had slightly larger than average breasts and curly hair. We were friends at work for about 10 years, and during that time he heard my sad story and I heard his. Our senior night turned into a few wonderful evenings, and we really enjoyed each other's company before making love for the first time. Looking forward to the big time at the wedding, I invited Allison to be my date. He responded seriously, expressing uncertainty about accompanying me to my daughter's wedding, given the family dynamics with my ex-wife. I told him that Bob needed a green light, my wing, a 45-pound German shepherd with a complex taste. I explained that if Bob didn't like it, he wouldn't take me to the wedding. He found this characteristic and wrote that I was a strange person. After Bob's test the following week, Allison agreed to be my wedding day, making the lucky girls happy that I wasn't alone. But Tracy seemed displeased with this behavior, giving me consistent looks. Since I didn't interact much with him, I ignored his opinion. But this bothered Allison, who felt that Tracy didn't like her. At the rehearsal dinner, I found Trace alone and finally asked him about his problem. Tracy responded with sarcasm, expressed disdain for Allison, and asked if I was dating Girl Scouts now. I reminded her that Tracy's jealousy didn't look good on her and that Allison, Tracy, and Kate were all the same age. I joked that Tracy had sold me on a younger female version, and she responded with shy grace. A year later, Allison became my second wife, and life went on. To be honest, I completely forgot I was on the bone chain registry when I called at work one day, and 30 years later I was told someone had matched me. Excited to be able to save someone's life, I knew that removing the bone chain would be a little uncomfortable, but the hero complex made me want to go through with the procedure. Further testing is required, and if this is acceptable, the release is scheduled for 2 weeks. After giving permission, I said I was on board. Although not very religious, I do believe in God, And there is an old saying that God works in mysterious ways. I never thought about it until 4 days later on the phone with my oldest daughter, Lisa, during our weekly conversation. Ariel and I avoid talking about Tracy's life, but Lisa mentions that a bone chain was found for Kate's sister, and they actively participated. Through Lisa, I sent my best wishes to Kate and Tracy and let them know that regardless of their actions, I do not wish to harm them. Lisa warned me that when I was an adult, I could call myself. I acknowledged this but explained that the less I talked to them, the less likely I was to say something unpleasant that I might later regret. Lisa encouraged me to settle for a divorce, pointing out that I had been happily married to Allison for almost 2 years. Recognizing my good fortune, I shared that while I didn't hate Trace, she wasn't on my Facebook friends list. I decided to send Tracy flowers with a good wishes card. Later, when I was ordering the bouquet, I had an idea. Bone chain matches are rare, and it was a coincidence that Kate found a match at the same time as me. Knowing the anonymity of the sponsorship process, I approached the registry contact, appearing optimistic, and asked about the likelihood of my match living in the same city. He was confused and admitted that it was the first time he had discovered someone's match. Frustrated, I realized that I would give Tracy a bone chain. Angered by this situation, I thought about how he had stolen my wife, never apologized, and now expected me to save her life with the help of a bone chain. I thought it wouldn't happen. 2 days later, I called the receptionist and told her that I had declined the donation. He almost cried, and when he regained consciousness, he asked me if there was a specific reason for my return. He explained that although I had the right to refuse, it was never done and would cause a huge upheaval in the registry. I apologized for the danger, but said it was best for me to give it up. He apologized and told me to call him in the near future if I changed my mind. When I told her that I had turned down the donation, Allison was furious. I didn't tell him that I knew who the donation was supposed to go to. He knew I had abandoned my duty to save someone's life. My wife expressed her frustration, almost yelled at me, and after explaining why I wanted to help, now asked me if I wanted to ruin someone's life. It was the first time I had heard Allison use strong language, and I decided to be honest with her that if I explained, I would not have informed my ex-wife or Kate about the donation. He was not swayed by my reasoning, accusing me of denying Kate a chance at revenge in life. I made it clear that it wasn't revenge. I stressed that I tried to share as little as possible with my ex-wife and Kate because they both hurt me. Allison asked if they knew about her involvement, and I assured her that it was all done anonymously, and I only found out by luck. Allison's expression softened as I shared this. He argued that I couldn't rule out the possibility of saving someone's life, emphasizing the difficulty of holding Kate's life in my hands. He whispered, "I'm a good guy. I can't stop help and the guilt will destroy me." I disagreed, saying that I didn't feel guilty. Kate and Tracy broke my heart. I stressed that they would never know. Allison expressed her concern, recalling the hope they had and how my decision might have ruined it for them. Allison and I continued to disagree, and it seemed like we grew apart as a couple. Our differences were more apparent than ever. At one point, he asked about my Christian charity, and I replied that I should blindly give money to someone who could harm me. He called me ridiculous in response. I explained that they don't break my heart and turn the world upside down like I do. I expressed my unwillingness to go through the pain and help them after 17 years. I reminded her that Tracy had been married longer than Kate and suggested that she do it. Allison continued to make decisions, and I calmly answered whether or not she could live with her fate indifferently. A few days later, on a Saturday afternoon, I left the room and informed Allison that I was going to the range to blow off some steam. He told me to come back before dinner because the girls were coming over and he didn't want me to smell like a gunshot. So he told me to wash up before dinner. I shot live crap out of a target with 500 rounds from a 9mm whitefish. I can't explain why, but shooting always makes me feel better. I think it's because you really have to concentrate on what you're doing. And when you stop concentrating so hard, your body goes into a relaxed mode. At least that's my opinion, and I stand by it. When I got home, I definitely smelled like gunpowder. So when I got home, I quickly headed to the shower. I looked at the dining table. It was set up for 6 people, and Ellison was doing the grilling. She's a great cook, and I was hoping she'd make these little brownies instead of baked potatoes. After my shower, I poured myself a glass of rye whiskey and brought Ellie a glass of wine. He seemed a little worried, and I told him that dinner was good for girls and guys. I kissed her on the lips. I was sitting in the living room reading on the computer when the door opened and the girls came in. Not with their husbands, but with Tracy and rude Kate. I wasn't happy to see any of them, and I glared at Allison as I stood to greet them all. I kissed both girls but didn't say anything to my ex or Kate. I saw what they called Allison's enthusiasm. There seemed to be a lot of whispers going around. Since she wasn't born yesterday, I knew right away that Allison had orchestrated this little intervention. I was more inclined to think of it as an entrance, since apparently I was the only one unaware of the encounter. I thought about taking my phone out, but then it was time to talk. But at first I had to put up with family and friends under the pretext of good food. Kate's illness was the main topic of conversation at the table. Although I did not participate, sitting with a thoughtful expression on my face, I thought dinner and dessert were fine. I really couldn't tell. Being a good host, I gave everyone afternoon drinks and we moved to the living room. After a moment of silence, it was time for me to speak my mind. I asked who would speak first, the woman who had betrayed my trust to set up the meeting, the woman who had broken my heart years ago, but now believed I owed her a favor, or the woman who had taken a married woman by surprise. Zerania loves her husband and now needed help for a chance. In life. As I spoke, I looked at each face in turn, and none of the women could see my gaze. When I said her name, Allison seemed excited, and my oldest daughter, Lisa, took the initiative. He acknowledged my lingering resentment towards my mother and Aunt Kate, but criticized my childish and infantile refusal to hand over the bone chain as beneath me. Lisa argued that it is wrong to take revenge by denying someone a chance in life, stressing that it is about a person's life and not something thoughtless like whipping someone with a cake. I took a sip of rye whiskey and cleared my throat with a slight shake of my head. I expressed my anger and said that everything in life has consequences. I told Tracy and Kate that they never expected such a dire outcome, but now they are trying to make their problems mine. I was presented with an unexpected opportunity to make a difference in the life of someone who had hurt me. Despite their belief that it was done out of revenge, I suggested that it might be a way to regain self-respect. Would I have any self-respect if I helped the man who kidnapped my wife to survive? And I don't think any of you think Kate should have it easier, because she's a woman. If his name is Carl and he's a 200-pound man, most of you are probably thinking that I must be right about what I'm doing. But it doesn't matter to me that Kate is a woman. He is a cow who stole a wife. He didn't know what he was doing. Kate tried to communicate her feelings by staring at the carpet. Tracy, who was sitting next to her on the sofa, reached over and gently squeezed Kate's hand. I insisted that my decision was motivated not by revenge, but by hatred towards Kate. I expressed that I despised him and did not want to help him in any situation. In the 17 years I've been with Tracy, I've had minimal interaction with her. Tracy cried, holding back tears, asking if I hated her, that I would deprive another person of a chance to live. He referred to my former love for him, suggesting that it would be an honest thing to think of as a good deed. I shot back, expressing skepticism about Tracy's concept of respect, calling her a beautiful woman and telling her she had no right to be lectured about respect. My voice went up and I told everyone, including Allison, to burn in hell and not leave me alone. I took a few deep breaths and Allison said I wasn't mad at her. He calmly told me that I was a good person and that I always did the right thing, that it was wrong to back down and that if I did, I would never be able to live with myself. Lisa interjected, teaching me Ariel and her to always do the right thing, even when it's wrong. Recognizing this, I said my decision was for me, to avoid regret and sleep. Kate suddenly screamed, refusing to let me die. Although he acknowledged the crime I had committed, he addressed the grim reality of his situation, reminding me that if I did not donate my bone chain, I would not be able to survive. Kate's eyes widened in shock. Asking me to help save his life was probably the hardest thing he ever did. I looked deeply into those wild eyes. I didn't feel the joy of confirming my decision, but I did. "No, that's all," I said. I didn't say the phrase, "I'm sorry," because frankly, I wasn't sorry. I'm not going to do anything I can to help this woman. Kate took my answer better than Tracy, who was crying. Allison went over to the couple to calm them down, and I heard her whisper, "I'll try and talk to her." He was so caught up in the moment that Allison never realized he was putting our marriage in jeopardy. I'm going to have to think long and hard about whether I can bridge the gap in our trust. I took the car keys from the key ring where they were. I walked out the door while 5 women were crying. I didn't come back for 3 days. I did not return dozens of phone calls from Allison or the children. The house was dark. I took a quick look around and decided that Allison was parked somewhere else by now. A suitcase and some clothes were missing, but almost everything was intact. I also took a suitcase and packed a few things, taking most of my clothes and belongings with me. I left the wedding crutch in the middle of the kitchen table. 3 days later, I received an anonymous call at work that turned out to be Allison. He expressed his disbelief that our relationship was over because I rejected him for being the biggest idiot in the world. I responded by expressing my surprise that I was married to someone who had completely violated my trust. I suggested that we both make things right, and that if anyone wants revenge, it's not me, but a higher power. I referred to the Bible saying, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord. I criticized her for what she had done and told her that she was really breastfeeding. Kate died 2 months after the official divorce, and I learned about it through an obituary in a local newspaper. I had not followed his work, and neither of my daughters had informed me. Despite being estranged from my daughters after the backlash, I stood firm in my convictions and support for Kate, and neither my daughters nor I backed down. My decision was right for me. I didn't lose a minute of sleep over not giving Kate my bone chain. The people at the bone chain registry were very insensitive to my personal situation and completely crossed me off the list. I was fine with that because the chances of getting a second match were highly unlikely. Bob was a bit moody and didn't like any of the women I'd brought home over the past year. But that was okay, because at 62, I wasn't looking for wife number 3. Surprisingly, I was still getting my fair share of intimacy. I learned that at that age, fit women outnumbered fit men 4-1. If she was in good health, there was a good chance my daughter would be ready for hay in the evening. Of course, we couldn't mess with too many young people. Neither of us really wanted to break the bank. But more often than not, we both loved something good in the oven. I jokingly refer to my ladies as beautiful singles. I haven't spoken to anyone in my family for over 4 years. When my youngest, Ariel, called me a few days ago to tell me Tracy had died, she thought I should know and invited me to the funeral. We've had 15 good years together and 2 kids, so I thought I should at least show it off. Maybe I can improve my relationship with girls. I sat alone in the back. It was a good ceremony. After the funeral, I addressed the girls and their families. I received shy hugs from my daughters, firm handshakes from their husbands, and shy congratulations from my 3 grandchildren. We went to a nearby restaurant to talk. About 3 minutes passed before the first salvo was fired. This is from Lisa. He suddenly asked why Aunt Kate was allowed to die, and I noticed that the conversation hadn't changed 4 years later. Calling Kate a womanizer, I assured her that would be the last conversation on the matter. Changing the subject, I pointed to a guy at a bar and proposed a hypothetical scenario where he kissed Lisa. Jerry said without hesitation that he would hurt him, and when asked about a potential case, he said that the man was already dead. I drew a parallel, remembering that he was dead, so Jerry wouldn't have to worry about donating the bone chain if he was ill. Jerry agreed, and I discovered that I hadn't saved Kate's life, partly because she was a woman, which might have been a mistake. I affirmed that I should not protect the life of the man involved with my wife or the person who kidnapped her. Jerry agreed that it was dawn, and he looked around the room, watching each couple's eyes slowly light up. I quietly shared that I wasn't proud of my decision, but I wasn't ashamed, explaining that Kate didn't deserve pity for stealing the love of my life. Ariel asked if I love her mother. How can I avoid feeling sorry for her? I admitted that I loved her mother a lot, but when she broke my heart, most of that love turned to hate. Recognizing that I was a man and not the monster her mother portrayed, I told her that things were not going well for her and that karma would eventually catch up with her and her friend. The other 4 adults in the room had tears in their eyes, and the children were confused and worried. I understand that it takes time for all of us to come to terms with this situation, and I suggest that you don't dwell on the past as life moves on.